I'm Bettye Vaden, and I'd like to welcome you to my kitchen and to Cooking 101 Tips and Tricks for Beginners. Today, I'd like to, first of all, introduce you to my production crew, Kathy Conrad and Pat Jordan, who will be assisting me later today. I hope that you will learn a few things today. You'll have a few takeaways that will enhance your culinary experience. As we get started, there are several pieces of equipment that everyone needs in their kitchen as they start cooking. First of all, we're going to start with knives. Now, if you think you're going to learn knife skills today, you're in the wrong place because that's not my forte at all. But we're going to discuss these knives, and I'll tell you why you need them and what they're used for. First of all, you have your chef's knife. This is a large one, and this is a smaller. Whatever works for you is great. We have a paring knife for small jobs, and we have the santoku, which is great for slicing, dicing, mincing. Any type knife that you like is okay. I would recommend buying a good set of knives because they'll last you forever. These are Wusthof, and I guess I've had these for probably 30 years or more, and they're great. I don't recommend putting them in the dishwasher, although they say that they're safe. I think the dishwasher does do some harm to the handles. When you're looking for knives, you need to find one that really feels good in your hand, and these did to me. This has somewhat of a curved handle, which I think is comfortable. This is a great knife, but it's heavy. It's a lot heavier than the same knife here, and it's not as comfortable in my hand. When you're looking for knives, I would suggest going to perhaps Williams-Sonoma or Bed Bath & Beyond, where you can actually pick them up and hold them and see how they feel for you. We're going to move on. Oh, I'm sorry. Sharpening your knives. This is a steel. I've never mastered it. I can't do it. So I'm just showing you. You might be able to. I like this. This is a Chef's Choice knife sharpener. And I've had it probably for 35 years, and it works great. Keeps your knives in good shape. You will find that a dull knife is your enemy. You will cut yourself more times with a dull knife than you will with a sharp knife. Okay, we're going to move on.
How often do you sharpen your knives?
Just as they get dull, but not on any regular schedule. But I can tell when they start getting dull. Pardon the noise, and I'll move this. Okay, next we're going to go, excuse me, to our cutting board. I like a wood cutting board. Wood has an antibacterial component in it. It actually kills bacteria. The other good thing about wood is it will not dull your knives. When you're cutting, the wood has some flexibility, whereas a ceramic or silicone cutting board does not have that. So I think this is knife friendly for me. You need to protect your wood board with occasional rubbing of mineral oil. It will keep it in good shape, and as you can tell, this probably needs a good coating of it. Just rub it on lightly and then rub off the excess. Only use mineral oil, because if you use Wesson oil or olive oil, it will become rancid and it will have an odor. And speaking of odors, if your cutting board does have an odor, say perhaps from cutting onions or garlic or whatever, take half of a lemon, rub it over the surface, and then rinse it off after a while. Or you can spritz it with vinegar. Also, your cutting board, when you're cutting meat, we know that poultry can be dangerous, so you do need to use a cleaner that is 99.9% antibacterial. Like I use this, Clorox. Just spray it, let it sit for a while, then come back and rinse it off.
Where do you buy mineral oil?
I usually order it from Amazon, where I get everything else.
Good answer.
You probably could get it at a hardware store, I would think. This cutting board, as you can see, has a trough around here. I like that for meats because when you're cutting meats and the juices run, it catches it rather than running off. I use this side for meats and the opposite side for vegetables, fruits, or whatever. That way you don't risk the cross-contamination that you could possibly get. So, anyway, then we're going to move on just to some fun things here. Made some notes so I won't forget. Here, this is a rasp or microplane. It's the same thing that carpenters use to go over wood, to smooth wood. It's a really handy gadget for your kitchen. Besides using it for, let me back up a minute. Everybody needs a scrap bowl. If you don't have one, you're going to find yourself running to your trash can a million times as you're making something. But this primarily was used for lemon zest. As you can see, the zest just falls in here. Lemons, oranges, limes, whatever. You can also use it for grating butter.
I never heard
Kathy's
such.
looking at me kind of funny. If you're starting a recipe and it calls for softened butter, and you don't have any softened butter, and you really don't have time for your butter to soften, it's great. So when you do it, it holds your butter as long as you can by the paper. The heat from your hand will melt the butter, but just give it this. See the butter as it falls down. If you grate a whole stick of butter, let it sit for about 2 or 3 minutes, and you're good to go. It's your softened butter. I can tell Kathy just found something. And Pat probably already knew that.
No, I do it in the microwave, just
I have
5
done it,
seconds.
but I find and when I do it in the microwave, sometimes it just melts.
You have to be
And-
careful.
Yeah, you do. I just don't want to take that chance. You can also grate cheese, hard cheeses. Gruyere, I use this for Gruyere a lot of times, for Parmesan, Pecorino, Romano, any hard cheese. And when you're grating cheese, you should probably put it in the freezer for about 20 minutes before you grate it. It will grate much more easily that way. Nutmeg and chocolate. If you want chocolate shavings on something, use this. But also, like the butter, hold it by the paper because the heat from your hand will melt the chocolate. Okay, now we're going to move on to strainers. Let me get those. Every kitchen needs strainers. You should probably have about 3 sizes for different tasks. These are basket strainers, and these are just your old-fashioned hold by the handle strainers. These are good to use as a colander to drain pasta or anything else that you might want to drain. I use this size for confectioner's sugar to dust things with, and probably this size for flour. It's great. Put your flour in here and just tap on it. It sifts your flour. Another thing that I found is useful is to, when I buy a 5-pound bag of flour, I will go ahead and sift it. It does say pre-sifted, but trust me, it's not really sifted. And once you do that, put it in a canister or some airtight container. It's there for you, and you just pull it out and use it too. Strain lumps of any kind, sauces, whatever, custards, or whatever you're doing. These are great. They serve the same purpose. I use these more for like colanders and type things like that. Any questions?
No, but I've never seen the bowls.
You've not? These are handy.
Yeah.
They really are. They're good to put fruit and vegetables in, just to wash. Yeah, they work great. You can find it all on Amazon.
I'm going shopping tonight.
I do say that, but in all honesty, our little shop, the market here, which is local, Marlene has just about everything you could possibly need, and I really do like to shop local. So anyway, we're going to go over a few of these things here. This is your instant read thermometer, which is great. When you're cooking meat, just stick it in the meat. Your temperature comes up immediately. You have your different things here, like the temperature for different types of meat, beef, poultry, etc. When you're doing this, make sure you don't stick it all the way through the meat because you won't get an accurate reading, or do not let this touch the bone. If you're doing chicken or whatever, insert it into the breast or the thigh, but don't let it touch the bone because you won't get an accurate reading. Okay. Salt. When things call for a pinch of salt, this is great. Keep your salt in a jar or some similar thing like that. You just touch it, pinch. So easy to do. I love this. Use it all the time. Everyone needs a whisk. This is the metal. This is the silicone. And depending on what you're using it for, especially if you have pots, your cookware, pots and pans are non-stick, you want to use the silicone. Otherwise, you will chip it and scratch it with this. This is handy. This is a silicone basting brush that you can use in your kitchen. This is a wonderful invention, the rubber bottom bowl. Yeah, it doesn't slip. You can mix. It's great. Has a spout. I love to use this when I'm mixing up cornbread because I can mix it and then take it right to the oven and pour it into the skillet like that. They come in all different sizes and shapes.
And those aren't glass.
No, they're not.
So they're not as heavy.
glass. They're not heavy. Not heavy at all. Every kitchen needs tongs. When you're cooking meat, even vegetables, whatever, especially meat, you don't want to stick a fork in it and pierce it. So use these tongs to do that. These are very heat resistant. They work really well. Pat looks perplexed. A good peeler for potatoes. Peeler, you want to see?
Okay. You all want to see too, don't you?
That has different, you can do
Oh, okay.
different settings on it.
Where do you procure such?
Huh?
Amazon?
Oh, sorry.
I got that, I think, at the market.
see it?
Yeah. Got it? Thanks. This is great for, let me find my little cards here so I won't forget anything. Besides peeling things such as potatoes or anything else, like any other vegetables like that or fruits, I use it for asparagus spears to trim those. And also to kind of keep your asparagus, if you're cooking it, to make it look nice and keep the stalks about the same size, you can trim them with that. It's also good for a piece of hard cheese. Just slide it over and you've got a very thin slice of cheese. You can do the same if you want a thin slice of butter for your toast. Melts fast, just whisk over the top and you're done.
I want to ask you about the asparagus. I don't
Yes.
believe I've ever
Trimmed?
trimmed. Are you talking about so they're the same length? Or-
No, you cut, I've got some in here. You cut it off.
I always just chop the end of mine off.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Me too.
yeah, yeah, you did chop the end of yours off. Let's see if we get some out of here. Sometimes your asparagus, you have some that are fatter than others.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Do you not trim the scales off?
Hmm.
You don't have to. It's pretty much an aesthetic thing. You can do it or not do it.
I've been serving ugly asparagus.
Just zip over it, just like that.
Wow.
Yeah. You see. And it certainly does not hurt you to eat the scales on asparagus. But when you do this and you trim them off, I like to keep them sort of the same size when I'm serving them. And as I said, some are fatter than others. So you can trim it down so that it's about the same size. Okay?
You're gonna make us fancy.
Gonna fancy, yeah. Well, it just looks prettier.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So we've done tongs. This is a mushroom brush. Mushrooms, I know some people will argue with me about this, but They really should never be washed. Take a damp rag, run it over it, if there's anything on it. Wipe it off that way. Or take your paring knife, wherever that is, and just lightly, mushroom, just scrape over the top of the mushroom. Or you can take a brush like this. The only time that I would wash a mushroom is if I'm going to eat it raw and I'm going to eat it immediately. Because if you have water in it, it's going to cause it to rot. It's just not a good thing. And also, if you're going to saute mushrooms and you have water in them, when you put them in your skillet, it's going to splatter everywhere too. Okay. When you are starting to cook something, you've got a recipe. Read that recipe thoroughly. Get an overall idea, if it's a new recipe, of what you're doing. And make sure that you have all the ingredients for it and all the equipment that you need. There's nothing worse than making a cake or some dessert and it calls for 3 eggs and you've got 2. Or you get to the end and it says put it in a springform pan and you don't have one. So be sure that you know what you're doing. That brings us to the French term mise en place. Have you heard of that before? MISENPLACE, which means putting things in place or organizing your ingredients so that you know what you're doing. If you've watched many cooking shows, you know that it looks so easy. They're going to make something, okay? They say, here we go. We're going to pour in a half a cup of onions. Here we're going to go with a cup of carrots and so on and so forth. That's all done ahead of time. That's all of your work. But if you do that and have all your ingredients together, it makes cooking so much easier. I use these custard cups, different size ramekins, whatever, to measure ingredients before I start something. This is good for your seasoning, salt, pepper, whatever this size. Then you go on up. Of course, if you need larger bowls or containers, that's fine. But you really need to measure everything that you're going to do. Have it in place. And then it makes your putting your recipe together so much easier. And the other term is bouquet garni. Are y'all familiar with that? Okay. It's an herb mixture, typically parsley, thyme, and a bay leaf. They are just essential for cooking and seasoning, for stocks and soups, casseroles, and meat, whatever. It's just a good herb mixture. When I do it, I like to chop them, and these are little mesh bags with a drawstring that you can see you can use. Put them in here to pull it tight, tie it, and then just drop it down into whatever you're using it for, your soup, stews, whatever. Works great. If you don't have these, you can simply take a piece of cheesecloth and fix it. We'll just pretend this is our thing here. Straw it up like this into a bundle. Tie it with your string, your kitchen twine. Same thing, drop it down into your soups or stews or casseroles or whatever. Then we have, well, there's one other I wanted to share with you. Hold on a second. Mirepoix. Mirepoix. Know what that is?
No.
Okay. That is a combination. It's a flavoring base and a combination of 3 ingredients. They call it the Holy Trinity. You got the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Onion's your Father. Celery is your Son. Carrots are your Holy Ghost. Okay. It is a 2 to 1 to 1 ratio. Twice as much onion as celery and carrots. It's a great flavoring base for almost anything that you can make. It's wonderful for soups and stews and that sort of thing. You just saute it, and a lot of times if you're cooking meat, you can use it as a base for your meat, and it's just a great flavor. But that's what it is. Just remember the Holy Trinity. Okay, now we're going to get to some fun stuff. Okay, now we're going to talk about eggs. The perfect hard-boiled egg. I'm sure everyone has a different way of doing it, but I found that if you place the eggs in a pot, cover it with cold water by about 1 inch, set it on your stove, bring it to a boil over medium-high heat. And as soon as it boils, turn off the heat, put the top on, leave them for 15 minutes. Drain them, put them in cold water or an ice bath or whatever. Is that the way you all do it? No?
No, it is.
It is, pretty much.
Close.
Add a little bit of vinegar and salt to your water. It just helps in the peeling process, and I don't know the chemistry of that. But you can leave your hard-boiled eggs in your refrigerator for about a week, and they're still good. And when you refrigerate them, it makes them a lot easier to peel. When you're slicing eggs, this is an egg slicer, which is great. You can also slice mushrooms in here or anything else that might fit. If you're doing a hard-boiled egg and it's kind of wobbly on the bottom or whatever, you can certainly trim it and make it flat like that. The other thing, let me find this egg in here. Which one? Okay. Here's my knife. Okay, I boiled this, I peeled it, and I'm going to cut it in half to devil it. What's wrong with that egg? My yolk went to the bottom. It's not going to be a word, but it's just not very pretty. So, in order to keep that from happening, the night before you're going to boil your eggs are in here. Put a rubber band around each end of it. Turn it on its side. Leave it in your refrigerator. The yolk will come to the center of it, so that when you put it in to boil, you're not going to have this catastrophe right here.
Who figured that out?
I don't know. I don't know. I did not figure it out. I don't know where I learned it. Okay, if you're going to want to dice your eggs or whatever, you can chop them or use any other means to do it. What I like to do is use a cooling rack, which you use for cookies, cakes, whatever. Put them on here. Smash. It is done in a heartbeat. It goes into your dishwasher. Cleanup is so easy. Wow. Okay. Did you learn something, Kat?
I did.
Good. Good deal. Very, very fresh eggs do not peel as easily as some that, I mean, they've got to be good. They have to be fresh, but your extremely fresh eggs will not peel as easily. Okay. We talked about mushrooms and eggs. If you're frosting a cake, put a dab of frosting on your cake plate or platter before you put your first layer down. That will hold it in place so it's not moving around as you frost it. You're going to make cornbread and you don't have any buttermilk, so what do?
Vinegar.
Vinegar, absolutely. A tablespoon of vinegar or lemon juice, and then add milk to make a cup. Let it sit, stir it, let it sit for a while. And it's just as good as buttermilk. When you're measuring things for, let's say, a cake or some dessert or whatever, measure your dry ingredients first. Then you can still use those same measuring cups for your wet ingredients. If you measure honey, if you spray your cup with Pam, it slides right out. If you're measuring shortening, just wet it first and it will come out much more easily that way. If a recipe calls for 1 cup chopped nuts, okay, you chop the nuts first, then measure them, okay? If it calls for 1 cup nuts chopped, measure a cup of nuts and then chop them. Most people don't do that, they just go for a cup and whatever. And in most recipes, it does not make a lot of difference. Herbed seasoned butter. When you have leftover herbs, parsley, tarragon, basil, whatever, you can put them in the food processor or chop them finely. Add softened butter to them, mix it well. I like to use ice cube trays. Put it into ice cube trays and freeze it. And when they're done, pop them out, put them in a Ziploc bag, and they're just there for you to use. It's often good to add a dash of lemon juice and salt and pepper to that if you like. You don't have to. A good sauce is, for meat or fish actually, equal amounts of mayo, mustard, and sour cream. And I usually use Dijon mustard. Then add your horseradish, your herbs, capers, whatever you'd like to add to that. Okay, when you're selecting garnishes to use for something, don't just use parsley all the time, like restaurants do. It's really good to use something that is a part of what you made, if you can. Say rosemary and mashed potatoes, use a sprig of rosemary to garnish that. And as we're talking about parsley, for many years here you could not get Italian flat leaf parsley, but that is what you should use to cook with, not the curly stuff that you see used as garnishes all the time. It tends to be bitter, and the flat leaf is a lot sweeter to use. Okay, now who wants to cut an onion?
You're the onion.
Would you like to cut an onion? Can't get anybody to cut an onion.
They make me cry.
No, this one will make you cry. Okay, Miss Pat, I'm gonna get these stinky eggs up here.
I want to do this because of the deal we've just made.
Yes, we made a deal. Okay. First of all, this is your root end of your onion, and this is the other end. You're going to cut off this end about right here. I would use that.
On the root end.
No, the other
Stem end.
Stem end. Okay. Cut this in half. Like here.
Not exactly.
It's okay. It's fine. Now peel it. The skin. Pretty strong. Okay. Now I'm going to turn this over flat. Take your knife. I'll just show you and then I'll let you do it.
Okay.
You're going to take your knife and you're going to make cuts like this all the way down to the bottom. Okay? The closer together your cuts, the smaller your dice will be. If you want coarse dice, just do maybe 3 cuts there. I'll let you do that, then I'll show the rest. Don't cut yourself that short.
I can see
Okay,
that.
cut in farther than you're doing. Okay. All right, after you've done that, then what you're going to do is kind of hold it together here and cut this way, all the way across. You're left-handed, aren't
I
you?
know.
That's hard.
Okay, I'm going to cut this way across.
Uh-huh. Yeah, but start here. I mean, you're just going to go about that far with the tip of your knife. Not all, yeah, down. But put them pretty close together. I'm not left-handed, so.
This side.
All the way across. Yeah, hold back here. I don't want you to whack your finger. Okay, now, kind of hold it together, then you're going to slice it like this. Perfect dice.
Perfect.
That's good.
Okay.
Great job. Great job. This works well. You don't have to do it that way, of course, but I find that it's easier to do it that way, and you're not just chop, 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 chop. Because when you do that, you're releasing all the oils from the onion, and that's what's going to make you cry. So, anyhow, let's clean this up. Because Kathy is going to cut an avocado for us.
True confessions, I don't think I ever have.
Really? Good. Do you eat avocados?
I do, I love them.
So how do you cut them?
I just buy guacamole somewhere.
I am loving that, girl.
Now you know why we asked you to do this class.
It's funny. It's pretty cute. Okay, here's two. You can demolish or do whatever you want to with. Should I show you first?
Yes, I think I need a lesson first.
Okay. I'm going to use this paring knife. Get a spoon out. Okay. So, always wash these before you cut them because you don't want to take any bacteria into, as with any kind of fruit or whatever. Start cutting here. And these are not very ripe, so they're harder to cut. Go all the way around to your back where you started from. Give it a twist. Ta-da. Okay. Got your half. This is your pit or seed. Give it a whack. It's not whacking too well because it's so ripe. Normally, well, fooey. It's not going to work because it's very ripe and tight. Normally you can do this and twist it, but it's not working. And your pit will come out.
Because if it's riper, it's softer.
Yes, these are hard. They're not ripe at all. I should get one that's less ripe. Let me grab one and show you how to do that. It's a pretty easy trick. This feels a little softer. Yeah, if they're really hard, they're not usually ripe. I don't like them when they're hard like that. Just cutting all the way around like I showed you before. Okay, twist. Okay, let's get a little bit of seed there. And here is your pit. Whack it. Twist it.
There you go.
There it goes. This one is a little bit brown, which we'll trim off. Okay. Then we can cut it this in half lengthwise, okay? And when you do that, and it's fairly ripe, the skin or peel will just come right off. There.
I don't have to be scared anymore.
Scared.
I'm scared of buying avocados.
You can buy real avocados. Then slice it like this, just like that. And you got perfect little slices.
Pretty.
If you want to chop it rather than slice it, what I normally do is take it and just do lengthwise cuts like this. Cut across here like this. Into whatever sizes you want to have. Then you can take a spoon and just scoop all that out like that. Or normally when I'm in a hurry, all you need to do is take it and just squeeze it. And there's your chopped avocado.
Yay.
Here, Kathy. What you do? That one.
Let me try this one. I want to do that.
Do
Can I
it. Do it.
So I'm just slicing it
All the way down.
all the way through, right?
Just down to the skin. Do your vertical, yeah, do your horizontal slices. That is in there. Okay.
So I just squeeze
Yeah,
it.
that one's not as light, but it should squeeze.
May not. Oh, it did.
Did it work?
Yes, it did. Bravo, bravo.
Isn't that fun?
That is fun.
Okay. Avocados do turn dark pretty fast. You can cover them with saran or whatever. I found that putting them in water covers them, and there's no air touching the surface, so it prevents the oxidation of it. I'll take just a little Tupperware Rubbermaid thing, fill it with water, put my avocado down in it, and it lasts for several days. Okay, we're going to get to the last part of this. It's talking about cooking meat, beef tenderloins, or prime rib. Am I doing okay for time?
Yes, you're doing fine.
Okay. Okay, beef tenderloin. When I cook a whole tenderloin, of course, you trim it, and I usually tie it. And maybe at some later date, I'll demonstrate how that's done. You tie it to make it compact so that it cooks evenly all the way through. When I do a tenderloin, I usually do it just rather than a roasting pan, on a broiler pan. This is your broiler pan. Most every oven comes with one. Okay.
I've seen those before.
Have you seen those? Good. Somewhere. Line it with foil, just as a convenience. Spray it all with Pam. Place your tenderloin on here. But before you cook the tenderloin, add a layer of water on the bottom of your pan. That's because the tenderloin will drip, and a lot of times it will start smoking, and your whole kitchen or house will be smoking. So that works well with doing that, or with doing a standing rib roast or any type of meat. Just a layer of water will absorb the fat that drops down. I leave a tenderloin out to get to room temperature before I do it. And I found that success in doing a tenderloin at 425 to 450 degrees for 30 minutes. That leaves it nice and rare in the center, and then as you go out to each end, it becomes less rare, medium rare, and for those who like it well done, you know, at the very end. Are you well done?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Medium.
Okay, good. And remember, when you cook any type of meat, when you take it out, the temperature is going to rise probably 10 degrees, maybe 10 to 15 degrees after you take it out of the heat. Let it sit for 10 to 15 minutes so that the juices do not run before you slice into it. And that's the great thing about this. If they do run, which they will somewhat, this catches it. The trough in this type of cutting board will catch it.
Betty, do you use the thermometer that you showed us?
I do not for that, because I've done it enough times that I found that works for it. You know, if you've got a really small tenderloin, I would cook it at 425 for maybe a little less than 30 minutes. But as a general rule, I normally do 450 for 30 minutes, and it's perfect for the way that we like it.
Okay.
Okay, for a standing rib roast or prime rib, you can use this pan, or you can just use this roasting pan here. Same thing. Spray this part with Pam, line that with foil just for easier cleanup, and a layer of water on the bottom. Now I know I have friends who think that I'm crazy, and my mother-in-law used to think that I was really crazy when I made this. She loved the prime rib when she came to eat with us, and she wanted the recipe, but she could never bring herself to do it because I leave it out overnight on the counter. And it really and truly takes that amount of time for the center of it to come to room temperature. Trust me, I've made it a million times. It's not going to hurt anybody. Pat's smiling over there. Okay, so you've got it ready to go. I rub it with olive oil, and then I sprinkle it with garlic salt and a lot of pepper. Leave it out overnight. The next morning, if I'm going to eat it the next day for dinner, the next morning I will put it into a cold oven at 375. It cooks for 1 hour. Turn it off. Do not open your oven because it will continue to cook. Have I given you that recipe, Pat? Have you done it?
Well, when I was going to do it, my girls were here and they forbid me to do it.
Okay, well, yeah, I can understand. The salmonella tenderloin, prime rib. Yeah, okay. Then, before you eat, turn your oven back to 375 for 30 minutes. And your meat is actually cooked. It just heats it up a little bit. And it's just the easiest way without having to check your temperature or worry about it.
And do you get the center rare towards the ends more on that type?
Yeah, and it truly works for any size tenderloin. I've cooked them this big to this big, from like 4 pounds to 14 pounds, and it works every time.
Wow.
The first time I did it, I tried it on company, and I thought, well, why not? Why not try a new recipe for company? When else are you going to try it? And luckily, it turned out great. But a friend of mine from Arkansas gave me that recipe, and she told me, she says it works every time. The other thing about standing rib roast, sometimes you can buy them with or without ribs. If I buy it with ribs, what I will do is cut the meat off the ribs before I cook it, but set it back down on the ribs. Because your ribs cook, you've got bones you can use for making stock or use them in soup or whatever you want to do. And I found that if you cook it with the ribs on when you start to cut it, your ribs might not be in the same place that you want your slices to be, the width of your slices. So that tends to work better for me. Do you ladies have any questions?
Okay,
Except
so let's
Pat's
go back
girls
to the
won't
cutting
wanna do it.
cutting it.
Mhm.
If you, does it alter the cooking time at all if you have without bone?
No, it does not. It works the same every time. Yeah. You'll have to fix it for your girls. Trust me, that's the reason that my mother-in-law would never cook it. She loved to eat it when I fixed it, but she said, I just can't let myself leave it out overnight. But nowadays, beef is really not aged like it used to be.
Right.
It's not left to age as long, so truly it is not going to hurt anything to do that. Well, that's all that I have for today, and so maybe till next time, bon appetit.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Bon appetit.